Okay, so when you think of a Greek god, you probably picture someone like Zeus, right? One of the polished, powerful Olympians living it up on a mountaintop. But what if I told you one of the most famous and most enduring gods wasn't like them at all? That he was wild, chaotic, and the only god who was ever said to have died? Yeah, let's get into the incredible story of Pan. So, who exactly was this guy? This deity who was the living embodiment of the untamed corners of the world? He wasn't the god of the sky or the sea or the underworld. No, he was the god of something way more primal. Something you feel when you're deep in the woods, far, far away from civilization.
And this is where Pan starts to get really interesting. He was a god of just shocking contradictions. On one hand, he could create music so sweet and so beautiful, it would just captivate your soul. But on the other hand, his terrifying roar could shatter your mind with a raw, instinctual fear.
To even begin to understand this puzzle, we have to go back to the very beginning. We have to go to his home. And no, we're not traveling to some grand marble temple in Athens. We're headed to the rugged, remote mountains of a place called Arcadia, the wild, untamed heart of ancient Greece.
So here's the official breakdown. Pan was the god of the wild, of shepherds and their flocks, and of that earthy, rustic kind of music. And he definitely looked the part. He famously had the hindquarters, legs, and horns of a goat. He was literally part man, part animal, a living bridge between the civilized world and the untamed wilderness. And you really gotta understand this contrast. Pan wasn't some sophisticated god like Apollo or king like Zeus. Nope, he was an ancient earthy spirit. You wouldn't find people worshiping him in giant temples. They'd find him in natural places, like caves and grottos. He was the god of the common folk, the hunters and the shepherds living on the very edges of society. Okay, so we've got it. He's this wild, rustic god. But how in the world do you square his two extremes, the beautiful music and the terrifying mayhem? Well, the answers are all woven into his most famous stories. You can see Pan's whole deal perfectly in the story of how he created his famous pan flute. See, it was born from a moment of pure, frustrated lust. He relentlessly pursued this nymph named Syrinx. To get away from her, she had herself transformed into a patch of reeds by a riverbank. Pan, not knowing which reed was her, just cut them all down. And then, in his sorrow, he bound them together and created his instrument. It's this story of incredible beauty born from a really dark, desperate moment.
Now, for the other side of Pan. If you were ever unlucky enough to stumble upon him and disturb his afternoon nap, you'd hear a shout so terrifying it would cause a mindless, irrational fear. The ancient Greeks called this panikon dema, and from that, we get our modern word, panic. It's a direct link right from his rage to our language.
His untamed nature was probably most obvious in his, insatiable lust. Let's just say his love life was a string of chaotic and, frankly, often tragic pursuits. He chased the nymph Echo until his followers literally tore her to pieces. He went after Pythias, who had to become a pine tree just to escape him. And in one of his rare successes, he even managed to seduce the moon goddess Selene, but only by tricking her, disguised in a sheep's fleece. For centuries, this was Pan, the wild, immortal, and often terrifying god of nature. But then something happened that was completely unheard of in the Greek mythological world. A story began to spread, a message that would signal a massive, massive shift in the entire spiritual landscape. Just listen to these words, recorded by the Greek historian Plutarch. Imagine being a sailor out at sea, and you hear a divine voice boom across the water, giving you this specific world-altering instruction. It's just an absolutely stunning, chilling moment in mythology. And this wasn't just some vague legend. It was actually grounded in a specific time and place. During the reign of the Roman Emperor Tiberius, a sailor named Themis was near the Greek coast when he heard the voice. He did exactly what he was told, and when he shouted the message to the shore, it was met with this great sound of wailing and mourning. The wild god was gone. Now, you have to understand, Greek gods were immortal, full stop. They didn't die. Pan is the single, solitary exception to that rule. And because of that, his death was seen as something much, much bigger, a symbolic moment that marked the end of the entire ancient pagan world and the dawn of a completely new era. But here's the final amazing twist. Death was not the end of Pan's story. Not even close.
In this bizarre afterlife, he would be transformed twice more. First into a figure of pure evil, and then, surprisingly, into a celebrated icon of freedom.
So, as Christianity started to rise, the old gods kind of needed to be rebranded. And Pan, with his goat-like features, his horns, his association with lust and wildness, well, he became the perfect template for the devil. Seriously, the image we have of Satan today, the horns, the cloven hooves, the goatee, is in so many ways the ghost of Pan.
But then, after centuries of being demonized, Pan made a comeback. During the Romantic movement, artists and poets looked back at this wild god and they saw something totally different. They didn't see a demon. They saw a powerful symbol of nature, of primal energy, and the freedom of the human imagination. He was a rebellion against the rigid, stuffy rules of the new industrial society. And that legacy is everywhere today, sometimes in places you'd never expect. He's the mystical piper at the gates of dawn in The Wind in the Willows. His spirit of eternal, wild youth inspired the name for Peter Pan. And he's been totally reclaimed in many modern spiritual movements like Wicca, where he's revered as the horned god, a symbol of masculine energy and our connection to the earth. So from a wild god to a dead god, a demon to a literary icon, Pan's journey is truly unlike any other. And it kind of forces us to ask ourselves, in our modern world of cities and screens, have we silenced that wild, chaotic, and creative part of ourselves? Have we maybe forgotten the god of the wild?